This is Dr. Andrew Marin, Brown University. If this recording finds its way outside the department, I want it to be treated as documentation, not as confession, though I know it is both. I have reason to believe that what happened in my class last October was not contained, and that something may now be following the voice that speaks these words. I'm not sure when it began. There's a point where observation becomes participation, where studying a phenomenon means inviting it in. I crossed that point. I didn't notice until it was too late. It wasn't an experiment or a séance, it was just another lecture. The subject was cognitive possession, the way belief can rewrite perception, how language and ritual can shift the body's behavior. I thought I was teaching a theory. I didn't realize the theory was already listening. They'll tell you it was an incident of collective hysteria, a breakdown. Students panicking over a seizure, fluorescent lights, static, smoke alarms. That's what the official report says. But the report was written before we played the tape back, before we heard the second voice speaking over mine. The one that said my name slowly, as if it was trying to remember how to use a mouth. The student's name was Ryan Keane. He wasn't extraordinary, quiet, punctual, the kind of young man professors forget they've already met twice. He sat near the back, always by the window, where the light hit unevenly. I didn't think much of him until the day I realized the light changed whenever he looked at it. At first, I thought it was reflection, some trick of the glass. Later, I understood the light wasn't bending. It was reacting. What I'm about to recount is not for absolution. It's because silence makes it worse. There's still a pulse under my skin that isn't mine. A rhythm that knocks 3 times when I try to sleep. Sometimes it comes from the wall. Sometimes from inside the tape recorder. It matches the sound I used to make before every lecture. 3 taps on the desk. A small superstition. A habit to focus my thoughts. Now when I do it, something taps back. Maybe that's my punishment. Maybe that's him. Either way, this recording is my last attempt to define it. Not as a priest, not as a scientist, but as a man who mistook curiosity for control. I thought I exercised him. I was wrong. I used to think universities were immune to superstition. The kind of places where ghosts were metaphors and rituals were just data points in someone's grant proposal. Brown was like that. Old enough to feel haunted, but too rational to admit it. In autumn, the campus smelled of wet brick and coffee. The air came off the bay, heavy with salt, moving through the narrow streets and the elms that lined College Hill. Every morning, I passed the same statue outside University Hall, the one whose plaque no one could read anymore. I never paid attention to it until this year. My office sits on the 2nd floor, east-facing. I like it for the window light. It catches the chapel roof at a certain hour, gold bleeding through the dust. There's a rhythm to these days. Coffee, lectures, office hours, grading. I tell myself that repetition keeps the mind steady. Maybe that's why I started tapping the desk 3 times before each class. An unconscious ritual, a little calibration of order. 3 sharp knocks. It was nothing. It should have been nothing. The semester's topic was Cognitive Anomalies and Faith Response, a cross-disciplinary exploration, or at least that's what the department called it. We studied how belief affects perception, how people shape their reality around conviction. My students loved the idea of rational miracles. They liked stories that could explain away the sacred with biology and code. They didn't want religion. They wanted ghosts that could be measured. Ryan Keane enrolled late. I remember his name from the attendance sheet. Clean handwriting, dark ink. He was one of those quiet students who never interrupted, never smiled too long, never made mistakes. If you weren't looking for him, you wouldn't see him at all. He always sat near the window. When I looked up to call on someone, his gaze was already there, waiting. There was nothing aggressive in it, only attention so complete it felt like silence. Claire Bennett, my teaching assistant, noticed him too. "The new kid," she said one afternoon while sorting midterm drafts. "He copies your notes exactly. Even your pauses." I laughed. "Some people are just good listeners." She shook her head. "No, Andrew. I mean your pauses. The way you stop mid-sentence to think, he writes that down." I dismissed it at the time. Students mirror professors all the time. That's how they learn cadence, logic, confidence. It was flattering in a way. But there was something about the way Claire said it. Too specific, too uneasy. That evening, the campus was quiet except for the hum of the library's air vents. I stayed late to finish grading. Through the office window, I could see the lamps on the green flicker as the mist rolled in from the east. The world seemed to pulse with a rhythm I couldn't name. Tap, tap, tap. I told myself it was the pipes. Old buildings make old noises. Still, I locked the door before leaving. The next morning, Ryan was the first one in class. He sat at the same desk. I remember his breath fogging slightly in the cold. "Morning, Professor," he said. His voice was soft, almost rehearsed. When the other students filed in, he didn't look up again. His notebook was already open, a clean page waiting. We began with case studies, subjects who experienced auditory projections after intense isolation. I was lecturing about sensory overlap when Ryan raised his hand for the first time. "Do you believe consciousness can divide itself, sir?" The class turned to look at him. I hesitated. "You mean dissociation?" He shook his head. "No, division. Like two minds arguing over the same memory." The room went still. "We call that cognitive splitting," I said, "usually associated with trauma." Ryan smiled slightly. "But what if it isn't trauma? What if it's invitation?" A few students laughed nervously. I redirected the lecture. "Let's stick to theory for now." But his words lingered. Invitation. I wrote it down later without realizing. After class, Claire lingered by the board, erasing slowly. "That was weird," she said. "They're just curious," I replied. "First years like the edge of things." She looked toward the window where Ryan had been sitting. "The light keeps flickering there. Maintenance should check it." I promised I would. I didn't. That weekend, Providence sank into fog. It happens every October. The air thickens, sound carries differently. You can hear your own footsteps follow you. On Sunday, I came back to the office to prepare lecture notes. The janitor had left the radio on in the hallway. AM static, soft and distant. When I opened my door, the smell of iron hit me. I looked down. A dead moth, crushed flat beside the desk leg. Its wings were so black they reflected light. I swept it up, told myself it was nothing. That night, I dreamed of tapping. 3 times, then 3 more, but slower, like it was listening for an answer. By midweek, Ryan had become a quiet roomer in class. The others called him Mirror Boy. He never reacted to it. He took notes in perfect rhythm with my speech, pausing at every comma. Sometimes I'd stop mid-sentence just to test him, and he'd stop too, pen frozen in air, waiting for me to move again. The others laughed. He didn't. I told myself he was harmless, just obsessive. Brown had its share of eccentrics. Still, something about the air changed when he entered the room. The temperature dropped slightly. The projector hummed louder. And there was that smell again. Iron. Faint, but sharp. On Friday, after class, he approached my desk. "Professor Marin," he said quietly, "I read your paper on induced resonance, the one from 2017. I looked up. That's a deep cut. Hardly anyone cites that anymore. It made sense, he said. The idea that belief leaves residue in the body, that it echoes. It was just metaphor, I told him. Ryan smiled without humor. Metaphors remember, though. Then he left. I watched him walk out into the fog. His silhouette merged with the mist by the gate. That evening, Claire sent me an email. Student complaint. Flickering lights, strange smell in sales hall. Same classroom. I didn't reply. The next morning, the lights worked fine. The smell was gone. Ryan sat in his usual place, writing something over and over on the edge of his notebook. I caught a glimpse as I passed. 3 short lines, evenly spaced, like marks on a metronome. I didn't ask what they meant. I told myself every world has its own rhythm. That was the last normal week I remember. The first real crack came on a Tuesday morning. It was the kind of day that pretends to be ordinary. Thin sunlight through the blinds, the smell of chalk and burnt coffee, a class already half asleep. I remember standing at the board, diagramming a case study on auditory hallucination. The hum of the projector filled the silence between sentences. I heard the scratch of pens, pages turning, someone clearing their throat. And then Ryan's voice, low, blurred, and wrong. Gloria Dei Sanguine. The words came out twisted, vowels dragged as if the air was thick. For a moment I thought it was feedback from the speaker system, but the sound had texture, wet, human. The whole class froze, then someone snorted. A few laughed. "Ryan," I said, "you all right?" He blinked up at me like he'd just woken from a dream. Did I say something? You mumbled something, Latin, I think. I don't speak Latin. The laughter spread. The moment evaporated, replaced by awkward giggles. I smiled too, pretended it was nothing. Guess my lectures are getting to you. The class went back to note-taking, but my pulse wouldn't settle. The sound had been too clear. It carried that strange delay, like 2 voices speaking on the same channel, half a breath apart. I told myself it was the room's acoustics. Old buildings, bad echo. Still, I made a note in my folder. Check mic distortion, Ryan K. That night I stayed late again, reviewing recordings for my next publication. On impulse, I loaded the file from that morning's lecture. The waveform looked ordinary until the 23rd minute. When Ryan spoke, the pattern doubled. Beneath his voice, faint and granular, was another tone. Not background hum, not static. A voice pitched lower, mirroring every syllable but off by half a second. Gloria Dei Sanguine. My throat went dry. I rewound and listened again, this time with headphones. The second voice wasn't mechanical. It breathed. I heard air moving between consonants, and at the end of the phrase it exhaled, almost a sigh of relief. I muted the speakers, stared at the waveform, then I closed the file and told myself it was an interference artifact. Microphones pick up radio bleed, overlapping frequencies. There were a dozen rational explanations. I wrote down 3. None convinced me. The following day, I asked Ryan to stay after class. He lingered near the window, hands in his pockets. The sun was behind him, outlining his shape in pale gold. Do you remember what you said yesterday? Yesterday? You spoke in Latin, or something like it. He frowned. I didn't say anything, sir. I was taking notes. You might have blacked out for a moment. It happens. Stress, fatigue. He interrupted. You think I'm sick? No, I think you're human." He smiled then, but the expression didn't fit his face. It was too still. "Then maybe it's not me you should be worried about." And before I could reply, he turned and left. That night, the wind off the bay howled through the cracks in the office window. I tried to focus on grading, but the static in my headset pulsed like a heartbeat. I unplugged it, yet the sound stayed, a low throb from the wall. Tap, tap, tap. I left the office lights on when I went home. 2 days later, the incident on Thayer Street happened. The official report would call it a student altercation. That's one way to put it. Claire told me afterward what she saw. She'd been walking back from the bookstore when a group of students cornered Ryan outside the coffee shop. They'd been teasing him for weeks, his silence, his stare, the way he always muttered equations under his breath. One of them grabbed his shoulder, the rest laughed. And then something changed. Ryan didn't shout. He just looked up. Claire said his expression went blank, like a curtain dropped behind his eyes. The veins on his neck darkened, rising under the skin like ink drawn upward by gravity. He caught the other boy by the collar, lifted him straight off the ground as if weight meant nothing. His fingers left dark marks on the boy's throat. No one moved for 3 seconds. Then Ryan let go. The boy collapsed, gasping, eyes rolled back. By the time campus security arrived, Ryan was standing still, whispering something no one could hear. When I heard, I didn't believe it. I went to see the scene myself. The coffee shop was closed, but the air outside was heavy, like static before lightning. There were faint scratches on the brick wall, too straight to be accidental. A discarded pen lay on the sidewalk, 3 tiny marks carved into its barrel. That night, I couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed at 2:17 a.m. Claire. Her voice trembled. "The one he grabbed, he's in the hospital. He's not talking. He keeps staring at the ceiling. And he keeps saying your name." I didn't ask how she knew. I dressed and walked across the green. The campus was empty, the lamps hissing in the fog. My footsteps echoed back with that half-second delay again. When I reached Sales Hall, the main door creaked open a fraction. I stepped inside. The air was colder than outside. I stood in the doorway, listening. No movement, just that faint buzz from the fluorescent lights overhead. I turned to leave and caught sight of a reflection in the glass case beside the exit. Ryan was standing outside, motionless, staring straight in at me. His eyes looked black from the distance. I didn't move, neither did he. That was the moment I realized Rule 2. Never look directly at him when his skin changes color. I blinked. When my eyes opened again, he was gone. Only the fog remained. Later that week, I reviewed the tape again. The second voice was louder this time. It followed my words, not his. When I said Ryan, it said Marin. When I paused, it breathed. When I stopped the playback, it whispered once more, soft, almost fond. "Hello." I replayed the section backward, desperate to find logic in the pattern. The waveform shifted, scattered into noise. But in the static, beneath all the distortion, something clear surfaced for a single second. It was my own voice. When I played the tape backward, my own name was there. I started writing everything down. Not the crises, the small repetitions that shouldn't matter and yet arrived in the same order. I called it documentation. It was bargaining. If I could name the pattern, maybe the pattern would decide I was an observer, not a host. The first rule found me at the glass doors of Sales Hall. Ryan stepped into the entryway at dusk and studied his reflection. He didn't see me. He raised his hand, and the image answered late, half a beat behind, like a rehearsal that refused to end. Delay, not blur. I counted in my head. 1.5. When he walked on, The reflection held him for that fraction, and then let go, as if it had to remember the trick of release. In class, the second sign arrived. We were talking through 19th century possession reports, how later clinicians relabeled them as hysteria. When the lights exhaled a thin dim, Ryan's mouth shaped words. "Help me." He lowered his eyes. The room brightened. I pretended I hadn't heard. The line between privacy and rescue was thin enough to bleed through paper. The third sign belonged to me. I tapped the desk 3 times to center myself. Ryan winced, tiny, involuntary, like a nerve touched by a drill. His pen left a black notch on the page. I tried again, softer. The same flinch. I stopped tapping. A habit can be a door. A door can be a promise you made without knowing. I drew a table. Stimulus, response, witnesses. I wrote as if neat columns could fence a moving thing. Claire saw the list when she brought me articles on anomalous speech and memory intrusion. "You're treating him like a study subject," she said. "I'm treating him like someone who needs a pattern named so he can be safe." She touched the line about the lights. He said, "Help me?" Quietly. "And you didn't respond?" "Not in front of the class." She looked toward the window where dust hung bright. "Andrew, stop tapping." "I already did." She didn't smile. The moment folded shut. I booked a small lab under the pretense of calibrating microphones. Foam walls, a metal table, headphones that squeezed like a jaw. Ryan agreed to help. "Read this paragraph," I said. He read about split brain experiments, hemispheres at cross purposes quietly trading information. On the screen, the waveform behaved, until you looked at the empty channel. It wasn't empty. A faint shadow tracked his voice like a ghost sentence under a real one. Faithful, but displaced. I switched tests. "Say, 'help me,' in an even tone." He frowned. "Why?" Standard marker. He stared a second too long, then said it. "Help me!" The lights dimmed as if they knew their cue. The sensor spiked. The heart monitor showed an uptick, then a second uptick a third of a second later, like another pulse consulting his. When I asked him to repeat it, he shook his head. "It hurts when the lights do that." He rubbed his temples and exhaled slowly. I walked him out. He watched the floor tiles, not the glass cases. When he turned the corner, I went back in. 3 diagonal scratches marked the tabletop, shallow and warm to the touch. I napped in the office and woke to the radiator's first claps. The dream clung. A blank projector, a class waiting. Ryan at the board writing my notes in my handwriting, backwards. Chalk tasted like iron. I rinsed my mouth and told myself to sleep at home. Claire arrived early with coffee. "You should go home." "I will." She didn't move. "What did the lab give you?" "Doubles. Audio, lights, heart rate." She sat across from me. "Andrew, what are you trying to prove?" I thought I could stop a thing by naming it and fix a boy with a table of numbers. "I don't know." "Then stop before you make it worse." I sent the files to Dr. Michael Donnelly, retired clinician, former guest lecturer, a man who knows the weight of rooms where words don't help. I asked about artifacts. I said nothing about the boy besides tired. He called instead of writing. Blocked number. Hospital hush. "Andrew," he said, "tell me you didn't run a mimicry task." "A what?" "You asked it to repeat you." I took too long to answer. I asked the student to read and to say a phrase. He exhaled like someone closing a file he'd hoped to forget. Some doors aren't built to close twice. I waited for procedures. He offered none. "If it's learned your cadence, don't let it hear you call anything by name. It likes names. Names are hooks. So I should stop feeding it." The call ended with a deliberate click. The silence after it stayed in the room like a patient that refused discharge. I wrote what I already knew. Rule 3, don't call it by name. Rule 4, Don't mirror it. I closed the notebook and promised myself boundaries. The promise held until noon. Ryan came to office hours and stood just inside the door. You wanted to see me? I wanted to make sure you're sleeping and eating. He considered for a moment. I closed my eyes. Food tastes like metal. Have you been hearing anything when you're alone? He tilted his head. You always ask in the passive voice. I smiled despite myself. It keeps the weather off the sentence. He stepped closer and didn't sit. Don't say my name when I'm like that. I swallowed hard. When you're like what? He blinked once, and the veins along his neck darkened slightly. You'll know. He left before I could say a sentence that didn't trip a rule. The office kept his temperature for a while after. The numbers got worse. My practice recordings carried a second breath that never synced to mine. Seminar silence felt populated, like a listener who'd already heard the answer and was waiting for me to catch up. Trophy case glass held my outline a blink too long. At night, my knuckles itched to tap, and the refusal hurt like a kept oath. Claire entered without waiting. He's getting hurt! She dropped a folder, campus security stills. Ryan shoved, Ryan blank, Ryan lifting a larger boy by the collar like weight had been deleted. I know. She folded her arms. Then either we get him help or we stop pretending you can lecture the weather into behaving. I stared at the desktop. If we send him to a hospital, they'll sedate him and monitor him into a hole he can't climb out of. And if you don't? I had no answer. She closed the door quietly behind her. That night I left the recorder on the desk and spoke to the empty room. Baseline marker, 9 p.m., office. Building noise, breath. Then a question I hadn't planned. Do you want me to stop? On playback, a new sound lived between want and me, one small consonant, like a mouth testing an answer. I erased the file. In the morning, 3 gray diagonal smudges crossed the rule lines of my notebook, not made by any sleeve I owned. I emailed Donnelly again without attachments. He didn't respond. Maybe he'd already told me the one thing he's allowed to say. On Friday, I lectured with the windows cracked despite the cold. The outside air dragged the fluorescent hum out. Ryan sat by the window, hands flat, not writing. Midway through, he looked up and passed the glass to his reflection. The image hesitated. His mouth didn't. I counted the lag. 1.5. A student in front asked about the reading. I answered carefully. The projector throbbed low. The lights sighed and returned. Ryan lowered his head. I spoke a little faster to outrun the echo. It didn't matter. The room had learned my cadence. When I paused, the pause breathed with me. After class, I stood at the board, erasing nothing. My hands shook in small ways. I wrote a reminder in the corner. Don't call it by name. Don't mirror it. Don't feed it rhythm. I erased that too. I took the long route back to avoid glass. The stairwell window looked over the green. Fog erased the world past the edge. I considered calling into the white and decided to pass that exam. When I turned from the window, a shape slid behind me. Mine, late by a beat. I didn't check. That's how you keep a rule. Claire met me halfway down the corridor. Donnelly? He said enough. She searched my face and found only a tired that didn't invite company. Then we take care of the boy, and we take care of you. I nodded once. She walked me to the door and stood like she might say a prayer and decided against it. I ran one last test before the week ended. A pre-lecture note to myself, short phrases, reminders for pacing. I stopped recording and hit play. The audio sounded fine for 10 seconds. Then, before my voice reached the next line, another version arrived, my own voice whispering the sentence a heartbeat ahead, as if it had heard the lecture already and was trying to teach me how to deliver it. I shut the player off and stayed still so the room could pretend I wasn't there. Patterns don't care if you're ready. They only care that you stay. I dated the page, boxed the entry, and wrote the line cleanly so I'd have to read it as it stands and not as I want. It started repeating my lectures before I spoke. By then, theory had become ritual. Every rule felt like bait left untouched. If control was possible, it had to be tested under light. I chose Sales Hall at night because I wanted control. Rows of desks, chalkboard, the old projector with a steady hum. If I staged a guided induction, breathing, attention funneling, clean prompts, maybe I could move this from superstition to protocol. Science is ritual with peer review. I thought ritual might fight ritual. Claire posted a sign, equipment calibration, so no one would wander in. I set 3 chairs at the front, Ryan, me, and 1 empty in case we needed distance. A recorder on the desk, red light steady. I told myself that meant we were in charge. Ryan looked hollowed out, focus too bright. He stood by the window and didn't check his reflection. "We'll keep it light," I said. He nodded. Claire clipped the pulse oximeter, tightened the wrist strap for heart rate, checked the fixtures with a flashlight. 5 minutes, she said. I faced Ryan, the projector fan breathed. Eyes open, answer if I ask. If anything feels wrong, you stop. That is enough. He wet his lips. If I stop, does it? You stop. That is enough. I asked him to feel chair, shoes, air. 4 counts in, 4 out. First minute clean. Fluorescence steady. I told him to picture a blank page and let it turn by itself. It did. Agency borrows itself during induction. It returns. You'll hear a word, I said. You will not repeat. You only notice where it lands. What word? Neutral. I chose window. Neutral is a lie when a life has been rearranged by glass. Window, I said. The room sighed. Ryan kept breathing. Claire watched our chests. Red light steady. I asked him to let thoughts pass like cars from a bridge. Which ones were his because he knew their footfall? He nodded at one. He did not nod at the next. The veins at his neck darkened. I had the impulse to tap the desk. I did not. Ryan, I said, before I knew I'd used his name. Rule 3 snapped on a soft vowel. The empty chair scraped an inch, as if making room. Lights hiccuped. The projector deepened. Claire shot me a look like a snapped string. Ryan's pupils widened. He looked a slip to my left, like something adjacent had finally arrived. Temperature fell. Teeth hurt. The recorder winked and steadied. In my ear, a second breath set in behind mine. The room skewed. Andrew, Claire began. Half her voice reached me. Half reached another place. I tried to salvage the exercise. Checklist voice. Pilot voice. Stay with the breath. He didn't answer. His jaw ground at a word with bones in it. Desks trembled, wood feet finding their own music. The vibration gathered into a single low note that lived in the stomach. Papers lifted, a pencil rolled uphill. Claire stepped toward him, then stopped, as if a path she needed was already taken. She braced a hand on the wall. He's not here. I heard her a beat later. An echo followed in my own voice, pleased with itself. He's not here. Ryan's lips parted. No word. A cheek muscle jumped. The empty chair angled toward him like an attentive dog. I leaned forward. The second breath kept time. My ribs felt occupied. Follow the breath. Lights flickered. On, off, on, then dusk. Ryan's shadow lagged by half a second. Claire edged toward the window to block the glass. The projector growled. The hallway door drifted open and then shut as if dismissed. "Take it out of me," Ryan said. The words pulled paper backward. A ballast popped. The remaining light went red by implication. I should have used any word but a name. I should have stopped. I didn't either. Ryan. The room tore. Desks scraped at once, legs carving circles. Windows inhaled and whined. The projector coughed a white square and died. The echo climbed onto my words. Cold wind came from nowhere and everywhere. Claire lunged and grabbed his wrist. The empty chair leapt and struck her shin. She went down hard. Her head hit wood with a crack. She stopped moving. "Claire!" My shout arrived late to me and early to the thing. Ryan's face contorted. The look of a man lifting something without a handle. Forearms corded. Veins ran black. Eyes rolled to the whites and snapped back against a tether. I crawled toward Claire. The floor bucked under my palms like something beating from underneath. The second breath laughed. Recognition. The echo began finishing my sentences. "Follow." I shut my mouth. My heart kicked. The second heart answered a half-beat later. The strobes made Ryan a skip-frame human. His chair slid backward, then forward without friction. Glass trembled. Chalk spun up, tapped the board 3 times, left 3 staggered marks like a metronome's ghost. "Take it out of me!" he screamed. The scream came from throat and room at once. Dust plumed. A tube shattered. The air tasted like electricity. I reached for his shoulder because men like me believe in touch even when it is the wrong sacrament. My hand stopped short. The distance grew by the length of a breath. My palm chilled. Hair stood unanimous. Claire stirred, a thin sound unwinding from her scalp. She tried to push up and could not. "Andrew." I shook my head and pointed to my chest like a prayer with no words. Red deepened. The corridor narrowed. Ryan convulsed once, twice, a third time. His back arched. The chair slid away. The neck veins flared and vanished like blinds closed from within. The second breath rushed in a hiss, and then went quiet, as if a radio had found a station and lost it. The lights died. No flicker. A cut. Darkness negotiated with my body. It asked what I owed. I paid in air. For a long beat, nothing happened. Then my pulse, high in my throat. 1 beat. Then another. Then, against it, a second beat, offset, patient. A polite knock from a neighboring apartment in a building no one lives in. The lights returned in pieces. 1 bar. Then another. The projector wheezed. The red implication bled away. Ryan lay on his side, hands lax, chest rising and falling. A small sound on the exhale, like a boy after a nightmare. Color returned. Veins hid. Claire breathed, eyelids twitching with short REM. Blood threaded from her hairline. I pressed my hand to it until it darkened and stopped keeping time. The recorder light held steady. I clicked stop. Silence tried to settle and failed. I watched Ryan's ribs. The room behaved like a room again. Chairs, papers, chalk. And still, the double rhythm did not leave. My heart struck once. Something answered, almost matching. Like a student counting under their breath. In my chest, a second pulse knocked 3 times. Not loud, certain. I pressed 2 fingers to my neck. The beats did not align. They compromised on a tempo that belonged to neither. Claire opened her eyes and saw my face and flinched. Not at me, at the shadow borrowing it. She found my wrist with cold fingers. "Is he?" "Breathing," I said. She let her eyelids fall. I stood. The room swayed and set itself straight. I touched Ryan's shoulder with 2 fingers like an instrument I did not want to detune. He did not wake. On the board, beneath a dusty streak, the 3 chalk marks remained, patient as hours. I looked at the recorder. The red light wasn't red anymore. I pressed stop again. Nothing left to stop. The fan clicked as it cooled. Claire's eyes didn't meet mine again that night. I wanted to say, "It is finished." Lie. I wanted to say, "He is safe." Another lie. I said nothing. When I finally spoke, I shaped the words slowly so they could not be borrowed. "It left him," I said. "I know where it went." The room accepted the sentence. The second pulse answered with a patient joy. Somewhere above us, the old landing clock ticked once and forgot the rest. The air smelled like ozone and chalk. Dust drifted down, spent. The projector gave one last click and surrendered the room to our breath and the new arithmetic of my chest. The official report called it a minor altercation in a classroom. No injuries, no property damage. Providence Police filed and closed it within a day. The university sent a statement to faculty. Incident contained. Counseling available. The air on College Hill stayed the same. Salt, whetstone, burnt coffee. But something in it had learned how to listen. Ryan was discharged 2 days later. Observation notes said he slept peacefully. When asked about that night, he frowned politely, like someone hearing a rumor about himself for the first time. He remembered no induction, no storm of light, no scream, just the smell of dust. His pulse normal, his eyes clear. The boy was clean. Claire handed in her resignation the morning after the review. No one argued. She left her badge and keycard on the reception desk, taped together. She didn't send a message. I saw her once more, from across the quad, her hair hidden under a rain hood. She turned when she felt me watching and then looked away fast, as if sunlight had hit her eyes. The umbrella trembled, not from wind. I didn't wave. The campus returned to schedule. Lectures, exams, the slow machinery of the semester. Sales hall reopened, polished, quiet. The maintenance team scrubbed the floor where the wood had blistered from heat, replaced the tube light that had burst. The chalk marks on the board had been washed, but faint lines lingered, pale grooves, like something once written in bone. No one saw them but me. My office was waiting. I unlocked it at dusk. The radiator clanked once and fell into rhythm. The smell of damp paper filled the room. Outside, rain drifted down the glass in patient rivulets. The sound was gentle, almost apologetic. It matched the tick of the wall clock, which had always been a half-second slow. The margin felt deliberate now. I sat down, placed a new tape into the recorder, and pressed record. "This is Dr. Andrew Marin," I said. "Addendum to Providence file. Subject, Ryan Keane. Incident resolved." The tape clicked quietly as it turned. I spoke the clinical parts first. Location, sequence, outcome. All in the dry cadence the administration expected. Words that keep the truth from staining the minutes. When I reached the end, the silence didn't stop recording. I leaned back. The desk lamp burned in a pool of gold. Shadows shifted behind the bookshelves like they had their own light source. I raised my right hand toward the bulb. Under the skin, faint blue and gray threads pulsed, moving in ways veins shouldn't. They faded when I blinked. The afterimage stayed. Rain thickened. It began to fall in a rhythm too close to breath. The window pane fogged from the inside. I turned the tape over in my hand. It felt warm. Somewhere in the building, the ventilation grates whispered. At first, it was air. Then it found a syllable. It said my name, and waited to see if I'd notice. I didn't answer. I wanted to believe the sound belonged to pressure and pipes. I wanted to believe it had always been there. The recorder whirred, static bloomed, low and steady. Beneath it, another sound began, layered, familiar. I leaned closer. It was Ryan's voice. "You said my name," it murmured, distorted, almost kind. "Now say yours." The room leaned inward. The lamp dimmed until the color drained from my hands. I reached for the stop button, but the machine anticipated me, a half-second early. The click came before my finger touched it. In the window, my reflection waited. Same jacket, same hollow under the eyes. But the mouth moved before mine did, shaping words I hadn't chosen. I didn't hear them, but I saw the breath fog the glass, and the fog formed letters, then faded before I could read. Behind the reflection, the world lagged by half a beat, like a film spool catching on a frame. I told myself I was tired. I told myself the eyes in the glass were mine. I told myself to finish the recording. The tape hissed back, waiting for its ending. I leaned forward, spoke the last line carefully, each word clean and slow. The way you close a prayer or an autopsy. End of file. Providence. Case closed. Or continued. The red light blinked twice, then steadied. I turned off the lamp. The room fell to amber and shadow. Outside, the rain eased to a mist. The clock ticked once, then hesitated, as if considering the next second. From somewhere near the door, my own voice, too close, too exact, exhaled. It breathed in time with me. Then, silence took the rest.